All right, our next speaker is Lucy Brown from Stanford University. Lucy will be talking about near-wall subgrid modeling for simulations of drop sliding and impingement. Lucy, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucy Brown. Like I was introduced, I will be talking about drops in various contexts. And this is some work that I've been doing with many collaborators, so Dr. Rossinelli, as well as my advisor, Professor Moyne. And my presentation is about drops. This is a photo of a leaf I took that has some very beautiful drops on it. The leaf is very hydrophobic, so the drops really, they remain very spherical, like closer to spherical than most drops are. And drops are they seem very commonplace to us. But in reality, they can exhibit a diverse range of different physical phenomena. So just to give you a small taste of the hundreds of different phenomena that they can showcase, we have freezing of drops. We have evaporation of drops in kind of some interesting ways. So this is what's called the coffee ring effect, where you see the darker outline around the rim of the drop, the evaporated drop. You have a coalescence of drops, so two drops coming together. You have rolling of drops down inclined surfaces, or surfaces where there's like a mean flow. And then you also have splashing of different drops. So all these physical phenomena, and what this means is that when you have all of these diverse physical phenomena that you can kind of have with drops, that means that you have a diverse set of real-world applications, ways that drops can improve our lives. And so these are just a small handful of the applications with drops. So printing, so if you got your poster printed, especially with inkjet printing, that uses some pretty advanced drop technology. You have aerospace applications, so this is some aircraft icing where drops impinge on the control surfaces and the different parts of the plane, and that can affect safety. And then you also have some cleaning and manufacturing process implications. So this is a cleaning step of the wafer manufacturing process where you have this cleaning apparatus called a Marangoni dryer, which uses basically capillary effects to clean a surface. And so what my lab is especially interested in is aircraft icing. So in this case, you have drops impinging on an aircraft and an airfoil. And you have two kind of main main physical phenomena at play. You have freezing, and you also have run back, where the drops impinge and then they run backwards on the airfoil. And so the run back speed is directly influenced by droplet physics. And then the competition of timescales between the freezing as well as the run back, that determines where the drop freezes on the wing. And then this location can affect the lift and drag and some of the safety implications here. So going back to these phenomena and these applications, all three of these beg the question of how drops interact with the surfaces that they touch. So I'd like to introduce one crucial definition here, which is the contact angle, which is basically the angle formed at the intersection of a liquid gas interface with the solid surface. And so here on the right-hand side of the screen, you see 4 different experiments where you have different contact angles where the drop hits the wall. So on the top left, that would be a very hydrophilic surface there, and then on the right, bottom right, that's a very hydrophobic surface where the drop is almost popping off of the surface. And so my talk outline is I'm going to describe the governing equations of droplet physics, and then I'm going to go through my numerical methodology that I use to study these effects, and then we're going to go through some drop impingement simulations as well as some drop sliding simulations, and we're going to keep in our heads all of this rich contact angle physics. So let's go through some governing equations. So the first one I'd like to present is the phase field equation. You do not need to understand all of these equations in every term to get the premise of this talk. But this is a two-phase flow time evolution equation. You can kind of think of it as like a bookkeeping conservation of mass equation. The basic idea is this is a mass transport equation that tells you where fluid 1 is in the domain and fluid 2 is in the domain. And the two fluids are immiscible, meaning that they're like oil and water. They don't necessarily mix very well. And so these terms here that I've highlighted, these impose immiscibility and kind of numerical robustness of the algorithm. So they're more numerically inserted terms. So the second one I'd like to present is the momentum equation, which is basically just F equals ma. And each of the terms have a physical meaning. The one that I did not have here an arrow to, the one of the divergence of that includes F. So that one is actually a small little numerical consistency term that doesn't play a key role in any of these simulations other than just making the fictitious terms that we've added in the phase field equation consistent with our momentum equation. So you can kind of like brush that under the rug, and if you have questions, please ask afterwards. So, numerical methodology. So we have our governing equations we'd like to solve in a domain, we discretize the domain, and then we solve using numerical methods, right? Well, we've actually forgot something. We forgot the boundary conditions and also the initial conditions. So the initial conditions are pretty trivial. You just have a drop, like your starting drop. But I'd like to really dive into the boundary conditions that we'd like to set at the wall. And so what we do is we take this geometric relation, this is just trigonometry, for the normals, the interface normals at the wall. And what we do is we take this equation, we discretize it in our domain, and then we solve a nonlinear system iteratively that converges to set the proper contact angle at the wall that we would like. And so it has this input of theta. But I'd like to pose the question, what contact angle do we use? Because if you look at this drop here, we have kind of a teardrop shape as the drop rolls down an inclined plane. And from the side view, we see that we have two very different contact angles here. We have a receding contact angle as well as an advancing contact angle. And the receding one is much smaller than the static contact angle, so the rest contact angle. And then the advancing one is much bigger. And so these angles are a function of the flow. They're two-way coupled with the flow field. And so then what we do is we consider a geometry very close to the interface. And we say that there's this viscous bending effect where there's all these viscous forces close to the contact angle, and they're literally just bending the contact angle, and the contact angle is kind of pulling backwards like a rope, and so it gets thinner as you kind of go upwards away from the wall. And so your microscopic contact angle is, in this case, is going to be smaller than your static contact angle. And then your static contact angle is only really valid in a lot of cases near the nanoscale, which is very hard to get your grid resolution down to the nanoscale. And so we need a model to kind of bridge this discrepancy of scales. And then that's where this dynamic contact angle model comes in that captures the subgrid dynamics of the contact angle back to the grid scale. And what we do is we take the well-known Cox-Monod and Tanner model, and what we do is we modify this with this dot product here to impose the directionality of the velocity field. So you can kind of see a schematic on the right-hand side showcasing this. We expect, since the motion of the drop is downwards, we expect the contact angle in direction 2 to be less than the contact angle in direction 1. And so we also replace the capillary length scale, which is the macroscopic length scale in this model, to the grid length scale delta here too. And so what we've done is we've written a code especially for this project, which uses second order central differencing scheme in space, RK4 in time, staggered grid formulation, as well as it can handle variable viscosity and variable density fluids. And then on the right-hand side, we just have a pretty test case of a gravity-driven dripping instability. And so first we're going to go through some drop impingement calculations. So we have this experiment set where the contact angle of the impinging drop changes as a function of time and then couples in and influences the drop footprint on the wall. And just the naive approach where we don't really care and we just set any contact angle, we see that the dynamics of the drops are vastly different depending on whether we set a 23-degree contact angle versus a 90-degree contact angle. So we have to be very deliberate with our treatment here. So what we do is we take the static contact angle reported by the experiment, use our dynamic model, and then we get these results, which I'll give kind of a zoom in video of this. And if you didn't really catch all the details, these are some snapshots where you can see in the early times as the drop really spreads radially outward, the contact angle is much bigger versus in later times when the drop kind of slows down, it kind of relaxes back to closer to the static contact angle. And so this is some quantitative results. We see that our method of setting contact angles performs quite well. We see a little variation between the static and dynamic contact angle simulations. And then on the right-hand side, we see that we can backtrack from the simulation the contact angle, and we have pretty good accuracy in terms of comparing to the experiment. And so now I'd like to talk about drop sliding. So we used this canonical set of experiments here where the researchers took an inclined plane and then varied the angle to influence what the capillary number, aka basically the speed of the drops were. And the primary forces at play here are the viscous forces, the capillary forces, as well as the gravitational forces. But here, something that's way more important than in the impingement calcs is the viscous forces. And it's very important to get these right. So I'd like to remind you of my grid layout, and considering my grid scale, we're going to have unresolved length scales below delta that have a huge influence on the overall dynamics of the drop. And so what we do is we take a control volume here, and we find that we have very large viscous forces inside of this very small confined geometry near the contact angle. And so what we do is we derived a model for the subgrid viscous forces acting on the drop from the wall within this confined geometry. There's a bunch of very hairy trig functions involved. But then what we do is we plug this model in to our simulation, and we see that this is the lowest capillary number test case. We see a vast reduction in the error when compared to the experiment of the speed of the drop going downwards on the ramp. We see in the blue curve, we have the wall stress model turned on, and then in the red curve, we have no wall stress model. And then for the second to lowest capillary number case, where we kind of get this little directionality of the drop, so break of symmetry a little bit more between the fore and aft, we see that we have much better results in the blue curve than the red curve, although we kind of underpredict, which we're still trying to address. I guess I'd like to talk, since I have time, about one more aspect of my work, which is the HPC component. So what I did with some of the colleagues in my lab is I took my code and we kind of together retrofitted some of the best HPC practices into the code. And I'd like to highlight a few of the most valuable ones, I would say, for my code. I guess the first one is enabling data level parallelism in the code by enabling SIMD instructions in the instruction set. So this component of this work to me highlighted the importance of inspecting the assembly that your code produces to make sure that you have those SIMD instructions to accelerate your code, as well as really crafting your code in a way that the compiler can easily understand and optimize. And then the second one is the importance of the symbolic layer. A symbolic layer is if you have a very hairy PDE to solve, like Navier-Stokes, for instance, and you have a lot of terms, you want to minimize the number of flops, but you also want it to be human readable. So what we did was we coded all of the terms in Python, and then we had the package SymPy minimize the number of floating point operations. And then we had a Python code that would then generate C++ code to a different file, and then that generated code would be what we actually run for those kernels. It's also a very easy way if you want to write different code for different architectures and stuff like that, it's also a very good idea to write a symbolic layer to avoid rewriting things. And I guess I should mention that these changes had almost a 4x speed up in my X momentum kernel, and then also for the phase field kernel, which is the conservation of mass, it had over a 16x speed up. And with that, I would like to thank Krell for investing in me from the bottom of my heart, and for all of you, I'd like to thank all of you for an amazing 4 years.